Welcome to the PurpleArmy podcast with myself, Ross McGregor, Graham Thompson and Stephen McLernan. In this episode we will conclude our clan all-time team by selecting 6 forwards and 2 Brits. Let's see if you agree with our selections. I'm joined again by Graham Thompson and Stephen McLernan. How are you, gentlemen?
I'm fine, thanks.
Thanks, Ross. Fine.
This week we're going to continue with where we've left off last week, and we're going to look at our clan all-time team, and we're going to talk about the forwards this week. I think we'll kick off, we'll go to you, Stephen. If you can just give us your 6 selections for the forward positions.
Yeah, this was a lot more difficult than my other choices outside a goaltender, obviously. I've picked Brendan Cook, Matt Keith, Lee Salters, Jed Galbraith, Ash Goldie and Jordan Kristanovic. We've had a lot of great forwards over the years, and some of the people I've had to leave out is quite upsetting, really, but I managed to whittle it down to those 6.
And Graham, what about your choices?
Well, I found it tough as well, although obviously I've got some very similar choices to Stephen's. My choices were Brendan Cook, Lee Salters, Stephen Meyer, Jordan Kristanovic, Jade Galbraith and Bruce Richardson.
Yep, I think we're pretty much similar again as it was the case last week when we done the D-men. My choices were Brendan Cook, Matt Keith, Lee Salters, Jade Galbraith, Ash Goldie and Jordan Kristanovic. We've wanted to go through our choices, especially the ones that we've maybe agreed on. Brendan Cook, we all seem to have him. Stephen?
Don't even know where to start. He was just a joy to watch. Disappointed he didn't come back for another couple of seasons, but again, he's one of the people who left the clan and went on to greater things in Europe. And yeah, Brendan Cook, just season 1, brilliant player. Just I don't even know what to say about him, really. He was just, everyone knows who was about at the time, what he was about, and yeah, just a fantastic player.
Graham?
Yeah, there's only so many superlatives you can use, I suppose, for one player, but Brendan Cook for a season 1 team, and again, I'm like Stephen was talking about last week, in terms of being new to the sport from a British hockey point of view, and not quite sure what kind of quality it is you're going to get. Brendan Cook was an absolute class act, and that was always straight away. And as Stephen said, yes, he's gone on to better things. I think he's still playing the DEL2 as we speak with the same team and producing high numbers of points. And we got him from the Nottingham Panthers, where already he scored a high number of points, very influential player. I think to have a player of that calibre in season 1 was just what we needed to kickstart the team properly. And as Stephen said, just the biggest shame was that he didn't come back. But yeah, I still follow what he's up to, and he's clearly a very, very high calibre player.
Yeah, for me, Brendan Cook carried the scoring threat for the team in season 1. It was always going to be a difficult year. If you look at the points totals, we also have just bubbling under Brendan Cook with 82 points was John Landry on 61. That's quite a drop, and the next top scorer being a D-man in season 1. I think it tells you the story. I mean, even now, to this day, Brendan Cook still has a higher goals per game for the clan than any other player, and he still has a higher points per game total than any other player in our history, albeit it's by quite a small margin over a couple of players, but it's still there. Brendan Cook for me is just an absolute no-brainer, and you can see that all 3 of us have went for him, and I think we all mentioned him pretty much straight away. So it's pretty obvious that Brendan Cook is going to go through into our final 6. Out of the other players that we've all seemed to have selected, we've also got Jade Galbraith. What do you want to say about Jade Galbraith, Graham?
He probably deserves an hour-long programme on his own, I would suggest. What is there not to say about Jade Galbraith? Just
careful.
Yes, it's okay, don't worry. A genius player as far as I'm concerned. A season 2 Jade Galbraith is still the finest player that I've seen personally in a clan jersey since the clan started. He was an absolute privilege to watch in season 2. His points scoring, he won EIHL Player of the Year. I remember going down there were many, many highlights. One I remember in particular was going down to Coventry. We had an excellent team and we played extremely well, but Jade essentially took the Blaze apart all by himself that night, and it was just a joy to behold. And there was many, many instances where that was the case. Even when we weren't perhaps playing that well, a bit of magic from Jade would just turn the game, score a goal or provide a vital assist, and straight away, things are back in our favour again. He was just that kind of player, and he was absolute pure magic to watch. So from that point of view, fantastic. Season 3, okay, delayed in coming back and joining us, but when he eventually did, he was actually free scoring when he came back for a while. But unfortunately, along with the rest of the team, the wheels came off and things went from bad to worse, and the points started to dry up, and the whole team was stuck in this malaise that I'm sure we'd all rather forget. But for me, as I say, season 2, that will live long in my memory as just being a fantastic player to watch. The whole off-ice stuff and the reputation that he came to us from the Panthers with and what have you, all very unfortunate, and you still hear stories to this day about his further adventures after he left the clan. I'm not quite sure what he's doing back in America now. I think he's playing in a beer league for some team back there, but at the end of the day, it's a shame because certainly he was AHL quality, if not even, NHL maybe a step too far, but definite AHL quality, and unfortunately it just didn't work out for personality reasons, shall we say, but an absolute highlight from a clan point of view, and I will long cherish the memories and cherish the videos that I've got of the games that he was in from that season.
Yeah, the season he scored 104 points, but I don't think we'll ever see that total again in the clan. I hope we do, but I don't think we will. He earned the moniker Jedi Jade because everything he touched, it was just magic, and it was a joy to behold that season. He was worth admission money on his own, and whenever he was on the ice that season, you just felt as if you were never out of the game. It was just truly fantastic to watch. Unfortunately, in Glasgow terms, in the third season, or his second season here, it kind of went from Jedi Jade to Jakey Jade, because it was totally night and day. You just didn't know what you were going to get from him. I think he maybe turned up carrying an injury, as far as I'm led to believe, which maybe didn't help, but it was just night and day. But for that season alone, absolutely fantastic, probably the best single season performance I think we'll see for a long time. Stephen?
Yeah, but Jade was a joy to watch, really. There was a few fans who were against the signing of him at the time. After, I can't remember what the incident was in season 1, but there was a lot of people saying that because of that they weren't so happy about him signing, and even the doubters by the end of the season, when he just had that absolutely fantastic season, they couldn't complain anymore. So, one of my favourite ever clan players, so this is a case where it's a fan favourite that I've actually, like a personal favourite that I put in the team rather than just going for sheer skill and ability. And it's a shame the way things have fallen for him. I would have loved to see him at Dundee last season, just to see him one last time, even though he was on the opposing team. But we all know that fell through at the last minute. So yeah, Jade, an absolute no-brainer from an ability standpoint. It's just a shame, as Graham touched on, that the personality aspect of his game kind of held him back from reaching his full potential, because I think we can all agree that he definitely was too good for this league, and he probably should have played at a higher level. But I'm glad we did get to see him for one season at least. The second season, not so much, but that was just a season to forget in general. But yeah, an absolute no-brainer for me is Jade Galbraith in this team.
Yep, so Jade goes through to join Brendan Cook. The next person we all agreed on as well was Jordan Kristanovic. So Jordan would probably go straight in and centre those two. How would you feel about that lineup?
That would be a good line, yeah. Well, I think we released Sergic Bernier and got Jordan Kristanovic, so that was quite the upgrade, I think. A great player, one that came in halfway through a season, just was able to turn the clan round. I think round about Christmas in season 1 we just came off the back of a really poor losing streak, which was highlighted by a gubbin in Edinburgh. That was my first away game. I think the first 6 games I went to we lost, so it was, I was getting called a jinx at that point. But yeah, Kristanovic, a great player that he came in, was able to turn us round in season 1 a bit. Season 2 he carried us with not as flashy as Jade Galbraith, but certainly a skillful player. And yeah, he's a great player. You'll have the stats for goals and assists, but a joy to watch as well, especially in season 1 and 2.
Yeah, Jordan still scored more points for the clan than any other player with 173, and he's followed, strangely enough, by Jade in 151. Jordan, for me, he was the kind of quiet Jade Galbraith. He was very, very unassuming. Just get his head down, done his work. Good two-way player as well. Graham, your thoughts?
Much the same. I don't. He was a very different kind of player to Jade Galbraith, and I would suggest, but my own personal opinion was that he was actually quite a flashy player. That's my recollection of him. His out and out skill was incredible. He was very forceful on the puck. Obviously, we're talking about a guy who played in the NHL. I think he played for Colorado Avalanche for a few games, and that kind of pedigree was obvious straight away. And yeah, he helped the momentum of the team. Obviously, with a year 1 team, we made some mistakes, and you would perhaps not argue that Bernie was maybe one of them. So to upgrade to the extent that somebody of Kristanovic's calibre came in was just help keep the momentum going. I mean, season 1, I'll maybe talk a little bit more about season 1 when I'm talking about Bruce Richardson, but that whole impetus that came in the second half of the season, a large part of that was down to Kristanovic. Season 2, he was outstanding, obviously, and I think probably one of the top players in the league, and perhaps an obvious choice for player coach in season 3. Which obviously the downside is that his clan experience and hockey experience, it appears, ended on such a disappointing note with what happened in season 3. He ultimately just wasn't the right choice for player coach, and it's a shame that it all ended as that. Although he came back as a player, the wheels had fallen off at that point, and the team wasn't performing, and he was trying his best, and you could see he was trying his best, but the whole team was just stuck in a rut. And him returning as player, many would argue, probably did more harm than good in terms of the overall balance of the team and what was happening in the dressing room. But so it's a shame how season 3 ended. But if we blot season 3 out, he was an absolute class act, and certainly for 1.5 seasons, he was a joy to behold. And again, an obvious no-brainer for this all-time team.
Do you think, in case of Jordan Kristanovic, when he took over the team in the season 3, that it was a bridge too far for him, or do you think the players let him down? We all know, and we all have referred it to it as the revolving door season. I don't know. I'm kind of of two minds. I don't know if Jordan going from player straight to coaching is pretty much the same bunch of players. I just don't know if they've maybe let him down. Stephen?
I don't think we'll ever know the full answer to that, but if I had to guess, I would say that it's probably a mix of both. I mean, I know that he didn't sign the whole team. I think there was a couple of players that were already signed by the time he took over. But the players that we did end up having, with the exception of, I'd probably say, Goldie and Burnstill, they didn't exactly light the league on fire, you know. So another way to look at it, if it wasn't for him as player coach, we wouldn't have got Drew Miller, because I believe they've got the same agent, and that's how that came about. So it's hard to say, as I said, but yeah, I think he didn't really seem to have the personality for it. You know, he was a quiet, unassuming kind of guy. Whereas we had Bannister and Richardson before that, who were quite in-your-face kind of players. So I don't know. I think that it probably was a step too far for him. But as I said, we don't know the full story of what went on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I think we all cherish the memories of him as a player. And I think that's the main thing. And he is the third player that we've all agreed on and goes straight into the team. There's one more player that we've all picked, and he's a player from this year, and that's Lee Salters. Stephen, what was your reasons for picking Lee Salters?
Lee Salters was a big part of our success this year. At the beginning of the season, Meyer and Keith weren't really scoring, but Trim and Pitt were on fire, and that's because Lee Salters was on their line. And then later on in the season, Keith and Meyer were on fire, and Trim and Pitt kind of fell off a bit, and that's because Lee Salters was on the other line. So I think he was an integral part, not just to one line this season, but to both that he played on. And I think a big part of that is Trim and Pitt weren't really the biggest players, whereas Salters was quite a big guy, so he was able to, you know, free up the room and make space for them to play their natural, more skillful game. And just a joy to watch. He would never shy away from a big hit. Saw him put quite a few people straight down to the ice with some big hits this season. And yeah, I pray, I hope and pray that he's back next year. No, we've got big skates to fill.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that. For me, Lee Salters was the type of player that we've been crying out for 4 years for. A solid power forward who could create space in the crease, create space on the boards. And that, I think you're absolutely right. Whoever was on his line had just that wee bit extra space to create the last pass, to score the goal. For me, an absolutely no-brainer, like the other three players that we've all agreed on. Lee Salters, again, you're right, we pray he comes back. Graham, your thoughts?
How to add to that? Everybody's already said it already. I mean, I can remember being shocked and stunned when we got him, because I couldn't believe that Nottingham didn't want to keep him. And I think some Panthers fans felt the same way. And certainly, as the season wore on, I mean, Salters, for reasons that Stephen's already covered, he actually had a fairly quiet start to the season, but you always had this idea that once certain things changed, the points would start flowing, and soon enough, that's exactly what happened. But it used to be a joy to behold, picking up on some Panthers fans' comments, and even going on the cage, picking up some comments about, why did we not keep him? How come he's playing for our so-called B team and what have you? That was great reading all that stuff, because he is, and as far as I'm concerned, one of the top players in the league. And yes, as with you two, I sincerely hope he does come back. I remember talking to him at the awards night just at season end there, and he was telling us about the injuries that he actually has, and this is again part of the reason why things didn't quite work out for us at the end of the season. The shopping list of injuries was incredible that he's been playing through. So I mean, I'm sure once he's got himself healthy and he's considering what he's wanting to do, hopefully he'll consider him coming back to us. That's got to be the main hope, obviously.
I remember when we played Cardiff at home, I think it was the last game when Cardiff ran out winners. That was one of the games Lee Salters didn't play in. And you kind of got the feeling that it might have been a slightly different outcome had he been there doing his thing. We'll never know. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement as well. Lee Salters to go through. That's the fourth player we've got through, along with Brendan Cook, Jay Gilbraith and John Kristanovich. We've now gone into a territory where we've kind of had a bit of disagreement. Graham, you've went for Bruce Richardson. Do you want to talk a bit about Bruce?
Yeah, this is probably a contentious choice, because obviously I can't talk about Bruce Richardson and not talk about him in the capacity of player coach. So that is not necessarily a level playing field. But I'll just, before I get on to all of that, as a player, he was a fantastic player on the ice. Obviously, he came to us highly experienced. He'd had a good stint at Nottingham Panthers, and basically with the lack of physical presence that we had in season one, it was basically down to him and Kyle Bruce. And I can always remember Bruce Richardson, that is, just jumping in at a moment's notice if some physical intervention was required, or some encouragement to get the other team to calm down a bit. He was right there. So very, very influential on the ice. Obviously scored a lot of points for us, as your stats will indicate, certainly in terms of assists. Player coach wise, he was just the perfect choice for us for season one. My outstanding memory of Bruce Richardson was an interview that you had. I can't remember the exact date, obviously, but sometime around about end of November, beginning of December, and we were on the back end of a pretty long losing run. I think we'd lost 8 or 9 in a row, and because it was season one and expectations were limited, nobody was really bothering the way they would nowadays, obviously, but you knew the team was trying and it just wasn't quite working. We'd had some early success that season, but I think we were 8th or 9th in the league, and struggling against the likes of Newcastle Vipers and the Edinburgh Capitals and what have you. And I always remember Bruce Richardson being interviewed, and he was asked where he thought the Clan would end up by the end of the season, and quite nonchalantly and confidently he said, I think we're probably going to finish 5th. And everybody thought he was crazy. Everybody thought he was absolutely out of his box for saying that. And you know what? That's exactly what happened, and he did it. In the second half of the season was again tremendous, and helped spur us on to bigger and better things the following season. So yeah, I know it's not really fair to bring the whole player coach aspect into it, but I think just his personality, his character, what he brought to the team as a player coach was tremendous for season one, and his offensive abilities were great. So from my point of view, he would certainly be in my all-time team.
I don't have any disagreement with anything you've said, and I don't think it's unfair to bring up the player coach thing. For me, again, it's kind of an anomaly about the way we've decided to do this. Again, just reiterating, it's just for fun. If you were selecting a full 18 to 20 man squad, Bruce Richardson would certainly been with a far bigger shout in my book. I think the term bleed purple for Bruce Richardson would sum up his year with us. He was the perfect guy to start off a new franchise. He would do anything for the clan on the ice, and he led by example, and you could tell he would drive the other players forward, which is maybe a bit of the opposite when we were talking about our last selection, and Jordan Kristanovic, when again he was maybe a more quiet player. You could actually physically see Bruce yelling at players on the ice and driving them forward. So for me, he's absolutely worth consideration, and I have to say I did consider him, and in another format, or maybe a fuller format, I have no doubt I would have put him in that team, and he might even have been one of the first in the sheet, because he brings the intangibles for me, and he brings that drive on the ice. Stephen, what's your memories of Bruce Richardson?
My memories of Bruce Richardson is when he got put through the glass in season 1. It was quite a vivid memory. Yeah, I'm with you, Ross. I loved Bruce Richardson when he played for us, but in terms of the format that we went with, I think it is pretty hard to put him into this team. I had him in my sort of selection for when I was doing this format and work. Yeah, I love Bruce Richardson. He was a great player, and he was definitely the right choice to lead us in season 1. And I know we did have a coach before that, in Adam Calder, and I think things might have went a little bit differently if that's who we went with. So yeah, Bruce Richardson. If we had to pick a coach of this team, maybe I would have him, but it'd probably be thinner now that I put an extra second of thought into it. But yeah, I think I'm with you, Ross. I think he just misses out for me. There was too many other great players as well. Not a knock on Bruce at all. I think there was other players who deserve a mention before him.
And going on to one of those other players that deserve a mention, I think both myself and you, Stephen, picked Matt Keith from this year. I've said a lot about Matt Keith in the few podcasts we've done already. Matt Keith, to me, is simply just the best two-way forward I've seen in a Clan jersey. And again, I think he's a good captain. A mixture, more leaning towards the Jordan Kristanovic mould, where he's maybe leading more by example. Captain Keith in my eyes, there's not really much more I can say, and I know you've put him forward as well, Stephen. What's your thoughts on Matt Keith?
I thought he had a bit of a slow start for us. I don't know if that was him just needing to find his feet in this league or what it was, but I think towards the middle and the end of the season we started to see like a completely different Matt Keith. I thought he was brilliant, as you said, a great two-way player, definitely the best outside of, I suppose, Drew Miller that we've had at the Clan, but he doesn't count. Yeah, he's just a great player who you can tell really cares about this team. A good sense of humour going by his first tweet as soon as he got back to Canada regarding a certain other EIHL team's colours. And yeah, I just love Matt Keith. I'm delighted that he's back for next season, and I think if we can build another solid team around him, that hopefully he comes back after the summer and hits the ground running instead of having a bit of a slower start this time. Because if he does, then we're on to a winner again.
Graham?
Yeah, rather awkward, I have to say. Matt Keith was a real tussle in my mind between Bruce Richardson and Matt Keith, and I wouldn't disagree with anything that anybody said about Matt Keith. He is an outstanding player, and perhaps my view was just slightly skewed because of the importance of Bruce Richardson in season 1. But, I mean, there's not a lot more I can add about Matt Keith. He is an excellent player. He did have a quiet start, as Stephen said, and maybe that, again, was figuring somewhere in my thoughts. But he obviously, as far as I'm concerned, coming back for next year, fantastic, over the moon. And I think I would willingly concede that perhaps in light of the rules of this particular exercise, I could probably concede to having Matt Keith brought in instead of Mr. Richardson.
Well, given that Stephen and I have both voted for Matt Keith and you're now giving us a wee concession, I think we can safely put Matt Keith through as the fifth forward that we've picked for this exercise.
And that's going to say that's as long as my next choice gets in.
Well, we're coming on to the next choice for you now. Will we go and get a cup of tea while you talk about him?
No, it's okay. I'll be brief. I'll cut it down to about 15-20 minutes. You'll be all right. Stephen Meyer. Funnily enough, after Jade Galbraith and Brendan Cook, he was the third name that I wrote down. Just simply because, for me, he's just been a joy to behold this season. In a team where we've had quality throughout, Stephen Meyer, to me, has been a bit of a standout. And again, I know we've spoken before about other players, and Myers included, where there was that element of a bit of a slow start to the season, and whether or not the influence of having Salters on the same line and what have you. Obviously, that's had an effect. But for me, he's just one of these players who knows how to score. And I've been looking back through some of the footage on YouTube of games from this past season, and he's just one of these instinctive players who knows how to get to the net and stick the puck in the net. A lot of his goals, they're very different types of goals. He doesn't have, in my view anyway, he doesn't have one particular style of play. He just gets it done. And to me, he's just having that instinctive kind of forward is such an important element of the team, because you don't know where the goals are going to come from, but you know that by and large he's going to manage to get them for you. Obviously, goal count and assist count, his contribution to the success this season has been significant. And as I say, when he's on the ice, I know he struggled with some fitness issues during the course of the season. He finished the season with a fairly serious injury issue, which again hopefully will be sorted out over the summer. And again, another player that I am dearly wishing comes back to the Clan for next season. But just that kind of forward who gives you confidence that he knows the way to the net and he knows how to score, and whatever happens he'll somehow just get it done, and certainly operating on that line with Salters and Keith. I mean, what an amazing influential line that's been for us, and the combined points that's produced have been incredible. So yeah, no brainer for me. This is the edited version, but he's for me he's just a great player, and he would be certainly probably my first choice back next season.
Stephen?
This was really difficult for me. I love Stefan Meyer as well, but this is where the conflict started to come in for me, because I'm sure we'll go on to talk about him later. After much deliberation, I removed Meyer from my team and put in Ash Goldie. As Graham said, Meyer was fantastic for us last season. He seemed to be able to pick a goal out of nothing. There was one, particularly against Edinburgh, I think it was, where he just hit it from the hash marks and just went straight past the goalie. Just a great goal and great vision as well. But yeah, I can. This is one where I can be swayed in this one. It was a very difficult choice. I really hope Meyer's back again next season as well. No, if we keep the whole first line of Keith, Meyer and Salters, I think we'll be laughing.
Yeah, I've got to say, I mean, I took Ash Goldie as well, but again, there is not a lot to pick from. I think I'll be the first person to tell you that stats don't tell you the whole story, despite the things I do in the background. I think you're right as far as his injuries were concerned, Graham. Stats-wise, I think if he had a season of full fitness, he would probably have eclipsed some of the stats he's got. It's a difficult one. At the end of the day, I chose Ash Goldie purely because I thought he was a more natural scorer than Stefan. But then I always remember Stefan in the penalty kill, taking the puck for walks, and the other team just couldn't get off him, killing a good 20-30 seconds. Stick handling fantastic. He's a bigger body than Ash in terms of just basically boxing people out. Maybe a stronger player. Maybe not quite the same goals per game ratio as Ash. Certainly not the same number of assists as Ash. Maybe slightly different players that way. Yeah, again, it's a very difficult choice. I already picked Ash Goldie. I could be swayed. Again, so we're going to have a problem picking this last member. So how are we going to do this one, guys?
Well, I conceded last time. I ain't conceding this time.
Stephen?
Ash, can I just say very quickly about Ash Goldie? And I don't know why, and it's a difficult one to explain because I can't argue with the stats and I can't argue with his points contribution. And also the fact that obviously he was the captain of the team, which is significance of which can't be overlooked. From my point of view, my outstanding memory of Ash Goldie, and I know this will be controversial, but there was a lot of chances he didn't score, And I know he got a little bit of stick on the forum and from other areas about, just hitting the puck straight at the goalie's chest a lot of the time. Okay, that's what happens. That's the game. But it's for me, he didn't necessarily make the most of all the opportunities that he had. So I suppose what I'm saying is that his points tally should maybe even have been even higher. To me, I keep coming back to this instinctive forward, but to me, Stefan Meyer is more instinctive than Ash Goldie was. Ash Goldie, to me, I don't know why. I watched him. I liked him as a player, obviously, and I'm not doubting for 1 second or trying to demean his contribution to the clan. But when I watched him, he just didn't really get me. Didn't get the juices flowing, for the want of another phrase. I don't know why, and I felt that for as long as he played for the clan. It just, for me personally, it just wasn't happening. Whereas if I watch something like Stefan Meyer on the puck, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what he does, and sometimes, creating assists or goals out of almost lost cause situations sometimes. I just never ever had that feeling about Ash Goldie, which is why I'm struggling. I was struggling even to put him on my list, which I know it sounds a bit daft given his points contribution, but it's just the way I feel about him. So that's why, as a player to watch, to me it's no contest, but it's just my opinion.
I can see your point, Graham, and I think the reason I ended up taking Goldie over Meyer, is, you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, Ross, is that I think he was either is our top scorer all time, or he was our top scorer all time.
You're correct.
For a bit. So that's why I ended up going with him. But I agree with you. Meyer had a lot more dimensions to his game. He was a great penalty killer. He looked more likely to bring something out of nothing than Ash did. As I said, I can be swayed in this, and I don't think he's got to back down anyway, Ross.
Well, I'll give you some stats. Since after just saying stats don't tell you everything, Ash Goldie scored more goals for the clan than any other player. As far as goals per game go, which is maybe a wee bit fairer, Ash Goldie's second only to Brendan Cook in goals per game. Stefan's not that far behind him, to be fair. In terms of assists per game, I think that's where Stefan loses quite a bit on Ash. Ash is certainly far ahead of him in terms of assists and points per game as well. Ash Goldie's only second to Brendan Cook again. I think Ash's on-ice persona didn't do him any favours. He seemed quite a distant player. He certainly wasn't as convivial. I think it was actually really because he was quite a shy guy off the ice, and I don't think that endeared him to some fans. I mean, all you ever heard about people complaining about Ash Goldie shot it to the chest. We all know the famous saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. At the end of the day, his production speaks for itself in my book, and to have a top six forward the way we've decided to go for it, and to have the person who's only trailing Brendan Cook by a couple of points in every category and has scored more goals for the clan than anybody else, it's kind of hard to leave a guy like that out, which is why I went for Ash Goldie, and I've qualified it by saying maybe if Stefan Meyer had a season of full fitness, we could have seen him being up there stats-wise challenging for that. And again, we're not putting together a team of penalty killers. We're not putting together a team with Bruce Richardson type players that are going to scrap. We're putting together the top six forwards that we think have played for the clan. We're not putting together a team, and that's one of the reasons I went for Ash. But in the format we've gone for, I'm still sticking to Ash Goldie. So Stephen, I think it's down to you.
Well, this is too much responsibility here.
Stephen, ask yourself, when it comes to handing over your hard-earned pounds to go and watch the game, who would you rather watch play?
That's not made it any easier.
No, that's why I said it.
I think last week, myself and Ross got our way getting Fritch into the team over Burnstill, and I don't know. I can see both points of view. I think, right, I'll go now. I'll say Meyer. We'll just go with Meyer.
Okay,
that was the first name that came into my head.
So we've got Brendan Cook, Lee Salters, Jade Galbraith, Matt Keith, Jordan Kristanovich, and now Stefan Meyer to round off our six forwards. Are we all happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah. We'll put Ash Goldie in the injury reserve, the first choice there.
I think there's a couple of names. I know we've decided there's a few names I think we need to mention. I don't think any discussion of clan forwards could really be complete without mentioning the likes of Ed McGray and Joel Champagne. Neil Trim, I feel, is often overlooked. His point production is pretty solid. And Mike Bayrack as well. He didn't endear himself to Clan fans for many reasons that we'll not really go into, but points production as well. And on the ice, I thought Mike Bayrack was an exciting player. And I think all those players are worthy of a mention. Graham, is there any other players that we haven't talked about, similar to vein, that you think we should have mentioned?
Well, yeah, I think for me, season one of my favourites in season one was Dominic Noel. For me, he was an absolutely fantastic player, and I would love to have seen him come back in season two. His points were fantastic. I think, I don't have it in front of me, but I think he went back to North America, and he had a fantastic season in season two. If I remember, somebody will go into Elite Prospects and shoot me down very quickly, but from memory, I seem to remember tracking him for a little while afterwards, and he seemed to be replicating that success elsewhere. But yeah, for me, Dominic Noel was somebody who I at least had a think about from season one. I have to mention, because the wife will kill me if I don't, a family favourite, which was Brock McPherson, who the much maligned Brock, because certainly in the latter stages he perhaps wasn't match fit, and certainly although he went on to become Dundee Stars captain, maybe didn't have the best season. But if you cast your mind back to Brock when he started with us in season two, he was a standout. He was a real discovery, and everybody, including myself, was saying great things about him. He was a tremendous player for us in season two. Again, he got caught up in all the nonsense for season three, where everybody's form seemed to dip. But I still managed to remember quite clearly what he was like in season two. And he, as I say, he was certainly a standout for me as far as promise for the future. Obviously, I don't think he's even playing hockey anymore now, which is a shame. But I think, I think he's married now and loved up and back in North America doing whatever he's doing. But he had a very promising future, and I have to mention him, as I say, because he was certainly a family favourite, particularly of the missus. I would be a shot if I didn't mention him. So there we go. That's my other ones.
Stephen, you get any other players you'd like to mention before we move on?
Yeah, Ed McGrain. I thought he was absolutely excellent for the season we had him. One of the best skaters and movers of the pucks I've seen, and just an absolutely fantastic player. And I'm sad that it was more towards the tail end of his career he was here, because I think he's retired now rather than when he was a bit younger, so we could have seen a lot more of him. From a purely skill point of view, and I know that injuries cut his time with us short, I thought Joe Cullen was a great player as well. There was one goal, it was a complete highlight reel goal that he seemed to score last season, before, and it just he seemed to go around like half the team and just put it past the goalie, and it's actually angering me that I can't remember who it was against, because I'd quite like to see it again. Going back to Bayrack, as you said, there was a few personality issues, so to speak, with him, and you could really question his commitment to the cause, but at the same time he was there to put the puck in the net, because he was more of a natural goal scorer than Kristanovic and Gilbraith, who he was on the line with. They were more your flair players. Obviously did get their fair share of goals as well, but I think without him we wouldn't have had as successful a season as we did, as someone who was just sort of plopped there just to put it in the net when a rebound came out. But yeah, they're the three main ones for me. Yeah,
we talked about Ed McGrain from last year. I think Joel Champagne is another player, and we've kind of heard there's been a very muted rumour going around that somebody heard somebody saying in a pub that somebody talked to Joel Champagne, who asked somebody if he could come back to the Clan. He's a player I would take back, and I think he's one that we've maybe overlooked slightly. Big body, maybe not quite in the Salters mould, but certainly a big body, certainly capable of finding net, capable of finding other players, and stats wise he's pretty high up, and for me he was a consideration along with Ed McGrain as well. And it's a difficult player to leave out, but when you're only looking at 6 forwards, again it's a kind of unrealistic scenario. But yeah, I think Joel Champagne's another one that's worthy of a mention. Is there a player you would take back next year if the rumour turned out to be true, Graham?
Yeah, absolutely. He was. I mean, I can't really add to what you've said. He was a tremendous player for us, very skillful. And I don't know, if somebody's heard a rumour about champagne in a pub, well, that's the place you're going to hear a rumour, isn't it? So I would suggest that maybe somebody misheard something there. But yeah, if he came back, that I would have no problems with that at all.
Okay, moving on. The only thing we've got left to do is to select 2 Brits from our 5 years of existence. Stephen, I'll ask you first to name the 2 guys you've went for.
I went for 2 forwards. I also picked a D-man, but as we were talking about before we started recording, it's not really fair going for the D-man because Sullivan's only the real standout that we've had. Obviously, we've had Sami Zajac, who is a fan favourite. But in terms of forwards, I've went for Farmer and Haywood, but I don't really know how I overlooked Davies in all honesty.
Farmer for me has been the top scoring Brit that we've ever had, and definitely a top forward. He's a GB international. For me, by far and away, the best British player that we've had in our ranks. I was kind of tossing between Ben Davies and Matt Haywood as my second selection. The Haywood thing, I think, we've all watched him. He's been here for 5 years. Hopefully he'll be here for 6. We've watched him progress. He is a fan favourite. He is Mr. Clan, if you like. He's the only player we've had who's been here from the start. And it was a very difficult decision between Matt Haywood and Ben Davies. I think Ben just shades it. He's just got that little bit more experience. But then you're thinking, it was Matt Haywood that went away to Holland with the British national team and not Ben Davies. Which is a strange decision for me. Not that I don't think Matt's earned it. I think there was maybe another player or 2 in the team I would have left out in order to take Ben Davies before I'd have left Matt Haywood out. But for me, it was really, really tricky. I came down to Ben Davies being my second choice. As far as D-men are concerned, yeah, I considered putting Sully in, but again, he's played for 1 year. Is it just a bit of a sentimental thing? Everybody likes to back the new guy, everybody likes to back the young Brit. So, and that's the reason I didn't have Sully in, and I went for Farmer and Davies. Graham, what about yourself? Who did you pick?
Hey, well, I'd love to be controversial, but I can't. I kind of agree with you 100%. Sully, I agree. He's had a great first season, obviously, and if he can consolidate that next season, then that will just be exactly what we need as a club, and obviously from the point of view of his career. I went for Robert Farmer and Ben Davies as well. Ben Davies perhaps not produced the points that were perhaps expected of him, but I think that's because he's playing a different role now. He's on that sort of checking line, which doesn't necessarily allow itself to ring up the points that you might expect. So from that point of view, there's no doubt he's a great talent and a very, very skillful player. And yes, I would, if I was Pete Russell, I'd be having him in the GB team, but then I'm not Pete Russell, so there you go. But Ben Davies was a no-brainer for me, and likewise Robert Farmer. I can remember Farmer playing for Coventry before he joined us. He was just that player that you hated to play against. He's niggly, he antagonises, and he's a horrible player to watch play against you. But when he's playing for you, it's a different story, obviously. And as you say, points wise and what he brought to the team can't be underestimated. And again, one of the better things to come out of that difficult season 3, and of course now he's playing for the Panthers and he's developing, and he's earned a lot of plaudits this season for his performances. Again, obviously, as you said, GB international, so obviously one of our top Brits.
Yeah, I see. And I've spoke to a lot of Clan fans who've said to me, who would your favourite Brit be? Who would you take back? And every time I say Robert Farmer to some people, they go, "Oh no, you want him for?" Robert Farmer, you're absolutely correct. You hate watching him playing against you, but that means if you have him in your team, he's doing all the right things. So yeah, I think there's no doubt for all of us. All of us are agreeing Robert Farmer, so he's easily going through as a first choice Brit. 2 of us have picked Ben Davies and one's picked Matt Haywood. Again, we've got the same scenario where, I kind of could be swayed purely because in many ways of Matt Haywood's contribution to the Braehead clan over 5 years. It's certainly worthy of recognition. Guys, where are we standing on that?
For me, I love Matt Haywood, and I think every Clan fan does, and his history with the club from day one, as you say, certainly deserves special mention. I think as far as, certainly for the last, 2 seasons, he's brought a lot more physicality to his game, which is good. So he's helped progress in that kind of aspect. I'm still remain a little bit disappointed about his lack of points contribution. And again, I'm sure a part of that is because of the type of role that he plays within the team. But for me, he needs to score more points, personally. I would dearly love to have him back next season, and hopefully, from a points point of view, that would be the season where it really starts to happen for him. He's a great, as I say, he's a great player, a great character, but I would just like to see some more points out of him. That's the only reason I couldn't include him in my final two.
Stephen?
I think if we're going from a pure ability level, then it has to be Ben Davies. I think he's a better player than Matt Haywood, but that's to take nothing away from Matt at all. I think he's a good player, and I think I picked him like you, Ross, just because he'd been here from the beginning. He's the only player that we've got left from the beginning since Mike Will left last season. And yeah, I think if we need to look at it objectively, it would need to be Ben Davies that goes through, because he is a better all-round player.
Okay, so that's Ben Davies been selected as a second and final member of our team. I think it's worth mentioning a few other players in terms of Lee Esders. You're right, we've already talked about Davis and Haywood suffering a wee bit points-wise. Lee Esders on that line as well for most of the year. The work that Davis, Haywood and Esders were doing on the boards and in the offensive zone, turning the puck over, that was the work that they were asked to do all year, and I think that's why their stats suffered, and hopefully that wasn't the reason that Ben Davis wasn't picked for the GB squad. And again, I think it's maybe you're right, Matt has never really been a prolific scorer. I think this year he's maybe suffered a wee bit in terms of the job they were being asked to do, but I also acknowledge what you said, Graham, about there was a wee bit more physicality for him. Matt Toe was a player I kind of was disappointed. Obviously his own personal reasons for not coming back to the Elite League. Very similar player to Ben Davis. It's just a shame that it's just not worked out for him in personal circumstances. Sami Zajac, another Brit that you think you mentioned, Stephen, fan favourite, kind of in the Bruce Richardson mould, if you like, with Bleed Purple. For me, again, worthy of a mention. Another player who, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have been too worried about if he had to come back for another season, and has certainly scooped some awards for Telford this year. Any other players that, I know I've run through a few there, any other British players that I haven't mentioned that we should be talking about, Graham?
No, not really. Again, I was going to mention briefly Matt Toe, which you've done, and I agree with you. A very similar kind of player to Ben Davis, and okay, he dropped down to the EPL, and he's decided to stay there, which is fine. But for me, he should be playing in the Elite League. He's that kind of player, that quality of player, and it's a shame that he's not. But Sami Zajac, the only thing I want to mention about Sami Zajac is that he was a great club servant. Again, disadvantaged by his size, but I will never ever forget the night that he went for Guy Lepine for the Panthers. And okay, he got beaten in the fight with Lepine, but for the first 5 seconds, Lepine was shocked himself that that Sammy was going for him. So Sammy had the upper hand with surprise more than anything else. I don't think Lepine ever did fully recover from that. But yeah, again, he was just a player that had an absolutely massive heart, and he was great to watch, and he did a great job for the clan for the time that he was here. To be honest, nobody else really in my mind. I think Tristan Harper I like as a player. For me, he's had a slightly disappointing season. Whether or not he decides to come back next season, obviously he's got another potential career on the go. We'll wait and see. I think the overall thoughts are that he probably will come back, and I would be fine with that. But again, same story. I think this needs a bit more point production we need from him. But he's another one worthy of note.
Stephen, anything to add?
No, we've not really been blessed in our 5-year history with a great wealth of fantastic Brits. I think we've covered the main ones, really. I like Harper as well. I hope he's back, but he's not really someone you'd have in a team like this. I would give special mention to a player that I was not a big fan of for his first 2 seasons, Kevin Phillips, but I think coming to his 3rd season, he was a bit more solid. I think it was 2 years of Tim Wedderburn influence finally rubbing off on him a wee bit. And yeah, that's about it really in terms of honourable mentions.
So there you have it, our clan all-time team from last week. Kyle Jones, John Landry, Tim Wedderburn, Scott Arson and Jamie Fritsch. Completed this week by Brendan Cook, Jade Gilbraith, Jordan Kristanovich, Matt Keith, Lee Salters, Stephen Meyer, Robert Farmer and Ben Davis. can catch us on Twitter at PurpleArmyPod or on the forum at www.purplearmy.rocks. We'll see you next time.